Vincent van Gogh is the very symbol of the eccentric artist, the artist libertine who hung out in brothels and enjoyed the company of prostitutes. But if you look at his paintings, it tells a completely different story. And if you look at his life, that also tells a different story. You have to remember that back then, and not much different today in many places, but back then it was extremely dangerous to be an openly homosexual man. And here we have an artist living in a very small provincial town. And anyone who's homosexual and lives in a small provincial town knows how difficult that is, even today. And Vincent liked to bring men over to his studio to paint portraits of them. And you can be sure this raised eyebrows. All you have to do is look at the paintings. He's telling us what's going on in his life through his artwork. Many of the men are handsome. Gay people are going to look at these, and many of us are going to know exactly what Vincent is presenting to us. It's obvious. But then what happens is the art authorities come in, who often use a heterosexist narrative, and they say, well, we can't have this brilliant artist being a homosexual. Even though what's in front of us is obvious, we must bend the story to make him a libertine, a mad genius who hung out with prostitutes. Yeah, that'll work. But hello. And when he does paint women, it's hardly sensuous nudes. It's, it's this. So then he gets involved with this straight guy, Gauguin, and he writes him a letter and says, oh, you got to come down and hang out with me, and I'll, you can share my house, and you can use half of my money, and, and it'll just be great. And obviously, Vincent's got a thing for Gauguin. And so Gauguin comes down, and apparently Vincent is acting like somebody who's in love, and he's making up all these stories about starting an artist collective, and but he doesn't want Gauguin to really be hanging around other artists. He just wants Gauguin to be hanging around him. And then you have Gauguin saying that he would wake up in the middle of the night and find Vincent standing next to his bed, staring at him. Why would he be doing that? This is a self-portrait done by Vincent van Gogh, and it was done as a dedication to Paul Gauguin. So this is kind of like, your selfie picture that you want to give to a date, like, this is how I want you to see me, because I'm rocking this look. So let's talk a little bit about Paul Gauguin so that we can get an idea of what's really going on here. Okay, Paul Gauguin was an up-and-coming artist, and he was selling his work, and he was raising a family, and he had a bunch of kids, and he abandoned all of that so that he could go off to a tropical island and paint women there. So he comes back to Paris thinking he's going to be like all hot and everybody's going to think his paintings are great, but Paris society rejects him because he abandoned his family. So all sorts of other stuff is going on, but he's basically rejected and broke. And this is the situation that he finds himself in when Vincent contacts him. So he's thinking, well, okay, I can go hang out with this dude and I can share his house and he's going to give me half of his money. And his brother is an art dealer, so maybe I can sell some paintings and get some money so that I can go back to the tropical island. And that's why he's there. He hates this town, and he's totally freaked out by what Vincent is doing. Paul Gauguin is not interested at all in having a romantic relationship with Vincent van Gogh. Paul Gauguin wants to get back to the islands where he can paint women, because that's what Paul Gauguin did mostly. He painted these beautiful, sensuous pictures of women, which would probably mean that he's heterosexual. But Vincent is this dreamy love guy, and he just wants to have this wonderful, romantic, artistic thing going with Paul. But Paul is just not having it. And when he tells Vincent he's leaving, Vincent chases him around town with a razor blade, and then Vincent goes and chops off his own ear because he's so distraught. How many heterosexual men do you know who do that for other men? Paul Gauguin left. Vincent began a spiral of depression and self-destruction, and then he ended up in a mental hospital with a bunch of nuns. So you know how that probably went for him. And this is interpreted as the mad genius artist self-destructing because the world simply does not understand his genius. And this has become almost a fetish in our societies, because in order to be a great artist, you must be a self-destructive genius like Van Gogh. But the way I see it is, it's a very human story of a gay man who fell in love and played the game and lost. And it caused pain and suffering. And in order to stop that pain, he self-destructed. This is a painting Vincent did of Paul Gauguin's chair. And we can interpret the phallic symbolism in the chair and all of that stuff. And that's certainly there. But I just see it as a very sweet painting. It's a little love song that he wrote to Paul. It's a little bouquet of flowers that you give to your sweetheart. I really think it's time to stop telling this story of Vincent van Gogh as a mad genius who self-destructed because the world didn't understand his artistic vision. It's far more likely he was a homosexual man living in a small town, and they didn't understand that part of his life, which led him to isolation. And then, he falls in love with the wrong dude, some guy who's just playing him for his money and for the influence his brother could bring. And, and gets his heart broken, but he's still in this small town and goes into a spiral of self-destruction, ends up in a mental institution with a bunch of religious people. I mean, this is a far more likely and human story. And to tell it otherwise really detracts from what a brilliant artist he was in the midst of all of this suffering and hardship. Vincent van Gogh was a homosexual man who loved to paint men beautifully, who fell in love with men, who suffered the perils of love.